Thank you, Mark. And also to clarify, the first two student housing projects did have a rent guarantee agreement, and that is not something we're recommending for consideration at this time, since USMH is no longer considering to provide rent guarantee agreements. The rent guarantee would provide the developer a fallback in case of student unit vacancy. Those units would be held vacant, and then rent guarantee payments would be made by the city and USMH for the first two projects. As we had mentioned earlier in the presentation, those units have been predominantly full ever since they were constructed. So the rent guarantee payments have been minimal, but at this point in time, with USMH no longer participating in rent guarantees, we were not recommending looking at rent guarantees for the next project or projects.
Do you guys have any questions for either of them?
No.
No.
So which option are you?
Option 1 or option 2?
Yeah.
Two.
I do have a question. I'm sorry. I understand the reasons why number 1 and 2 are where they stand in the ratings. But I have to admit, I like JR Investments because it's right across the street from the University of Maryland. And I like 49 North Jonathan Street also. So maybe those are two that we need to help groom into the next round of student housing. Both of those are located, North Jonathan is located, a quick walk down the alley to the University of Maryland, and 6 to 16 is right across the street. I mean, those are both situated perfectly for students to attend the University of Maryland.
I agree.
I want to make sure we don't lose track of those two in the coming rounds of student housing.
Understood. Yes, they are definitely in ideal locations, and actually the student housing project map was included in the packet. You're definitely right. Those two properties, there is one at 6 to 16 West Washington Street, of course, right beside the main campus, and 49 North Jonathan Street is in between the physician assistant Walnut Street area classrooms and then the main campus as well. So we can definitely also continue to keep those properties in mind if there are other incentives that could help incentivize redevelopment as well, if the student housing funding for this current round doesn't work out.
Okay.
So two? Two.
Yeah, I think we should do two.
There we go.
Okay, so we will look at option 2 then for the top 2 proposals, and I think what we'll work on from here, as we had mentioned in the memorandum, is negotiating then with each of those developers. The student housing development agreements in the past, there are certain considerations obviously for vacancy and things of that nature, so we will have to work out those terms and conditions, and then the goal would be likely in February or March to come back to the mayor and city council with proposed terms and conditions depending on how those negotiations go, and hopefully get the student housing development agreement or agreements executed then in the spring of this year, and pave the way for more student housing. And Mark's still there, and Mark can back me up on this, I hope. In all these conversations with student housing, I think a neat story to tell is not only demand possibly seeing students housing demand for USMH students here in Hagerstown, but seeing out of the area students that have relocated here for the classes, possibly also seeking permanent housing here, namely the physician assistant program. So coming to the area for the physician assistant program, which is in high demand, but also seeing the opportunities for relocating here and starting their careers here as physician assistants. Is that correct, Mark?
That is absolutely correct. I don't want anyone to be misled that we've done a scientific survey, but in discussions with the 25 physician assistants that will be graduating this May, a significant number of them have indicated to us that they would prefer to work in the area and live in the area. So that is in fact going to increase the demand for housing if we keep the students that are currently students but become working professionals. If we allow them to remain in USMH designated housing, that's in fact going to increase the overall demand.
Thank you.
Thank you, yep.
Good?
Thank you.
All right. City Administrator?
Just a couple things, Mayor. First is city offices will be closed on Monday for Martin Luther King Day. For those of us to get our trash picked up, our regular schedule is Monday night, Tuesday morning. That schedule stays as is. So if you set your trash out Monday night, set your trash out on Monday night. Mayor, myself, I believe Councilman Alshire, all of us will have to put our trash out Monday night. We don't get a break. Last thing is, and just take a minute, we got some awful news yesterday that a colleague of ours at the county, Mark Mades, passed away suddenly. Mark, several of us here in the city have worked with Mark over the years. He was the communications manager over at the county, mostly with radio communications. So many of us have gotten to know Mark very well. I got to know Mark very well. His oldest daughter and my youngest son were classmates at South High. She was a cheerleader and my son played sports, and we got to commiserate on a regular basis at South High athletic events, and got to know Mark pretty well, and truly heartbroken that he passed away yesterday. And we just want to send our condolences to Susan, his wife, his kids, and the rest of his family. That's it for me.
Oh, me neither.
Nothing.
Just happy birthday, Madam Mayor.
Okay.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Happy birthday.
Happy
We won't torture you like this again on your birthday, having a session like this.
Thank you, I appreciate that. The only thing I have to add is that our community surveys are being mailed hopefully tomorrow, if not the next day. Thank you to Paul Falk and everyone who helped with that. They carried in like a whole bin of them today, and I thought, wow, that's a lot of envelopes, and apparently it was only like 1/8 of them.
Wow.
So be on the lookout if you live in Hagerstown, and please fill that out and return it back to us as quickly as possible. And that's all I have this evening, so we're adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you.
Welcome to Council Wrap. I'm Wes Decker. Good to have you along. Let me be the last to say Happy New Year's. We're now well into 2021, and as we're delving into 2021, one of the things that perhaps we didn't know in 2020, in what was such a topsy-turvy year as it was that we would be dealing with exactly what to do with Municipal Stadium, given the fact that the Hagerstown Suns, the primary tenant, now gone from Municipal Stadium. And joining me to talk about this, as you heard discussed in the council meeting earlier, we got City Engineer Rodney Tissue and Council Member Kristen Alshire. Kristen, let me start with you, because I think you were pretty clear during the meeting on how you feel about what should be done with Municipal Stadium and what should not be done. And there was a lot of talk about perhaps in the short term, a lot of organizations, folks sort of coming out of the woodwork, looking at this perhaps as an opportunity for them to do something now because the stadium is not inhabited, so to speak, by the Hagerstown Suns. So just kind of restate your position on this and the way that you feel about this at the present time.
Sure. I mean, I think there were 2 or 3 things that came up during the meeting, and the one of which, as Rodney alluded, is it's a big place. It's a lot to take care of. It's not, it's not something simple like a park pavilion or even a softball field, a recreational area. It's a big commercial space, and so for me, I had to look at a couple of metrics. One was, what's it going to cost to keep this thing going? Because as much as groups and organizations and entities, have an interest in using it, the Suns, the primary tenant, paid a pretty high price to use it, and so I don't think that any number of those groups and organizations have as keen an awareness of, the true costs associated with booking that place and using it and operating it and the maintenance associated. And so some of my concern was that cost is going to fall back on the city, right, especially the more we try and diversify the users that would like to, because as staff alluded, it isn't something as simple as saying we're going to have it be a baseball field one day and a concert center the next. The space just isn't built for that type of diversity, and the associated amenities, with it are basically shells of what they were when it was fully functional and being managed and maintained by a single user. The second was the cost of demolition. I mean, I looked at that and said, okay, we are at a stage of value with that facility where the cost to demo it is very low because the recyclable value of those materials that would be removed is very high. And so that window of opportunity, is only going to last for a period of time. I think when we looked at it, when staff looked at it, five years ago, it was like $170,000, and right now it's at like $100,000. And so, that number is going to fluctuate, and that cost is going to be borne by the city and by default then the city citizens. And so I have to weigh, when do you capture that moment where it is at least cost possible to do so. One of the other items of concern I had is, and let's all be very honest, that work in local government is, once you provide a venue for an entity, that entity uses that venue and then gains some sort of ownership of the space, some inherent unspoken guarantee that it's going to be there and open and ready and available in the context of which you're sort of doing it in a transition period. And so for me, when we talk about events, I wasn't envisioning, one, the city incurring costs in those events, or two, it being any type of long-term relationship-oriented entity events, but rather, if they want to have a single use here for one time, I get that. This is a transition period. But the longer we let that go, the more we limp into that process, the more we become burdened and beholden to it being there as sort of this subsidized amenity for that type of variable process. And so when I weigh all those things, and I've made no secret about my desire for it to be an indoor turf facility, I think that it is, uniquely positioned with accessibility, with its parking, with its juxtaposition between, frankly speaking, the North Hagerstown School District area and the South Hagerstown School District area. You know, it just provides that sort of one-time opportunity to accomplish that type of action and that type of amenity that is desperately needed in a location that clearly benefits all of those other things that folks are going to do, like stay in hotels and eat and visit places in our city.
Yeah, and let's face it, there's a little bit of a negotiation process that goes on when, Rodney, when we talk about some of these organizations who have sort of come out and said, hey, I'd like to use the stadium for this or that during this upcoming year because, you know, you don't have the Hagerstown Suns there anymore. To some degree, I think they feel like they're saying, hey, we're doing the city a favor by using this facility and maybe even while we're there, maintaining it to some degree. But I think something that we've seen over a number of years here in the city of Hagerstown is that this is a facility that isn't getting any younger or any better as time goes by. So can you sort of lay the groundwork as to how much money the city puts into this stadium already? We were getting money back from the Hagerstown Suns in terms of that contract, that agreement, but now that won't be happening. So to Kristen's point about the potential of demolishing the stadium, you know, where do we stand in terms of what we're putting into that and how much we'll continue to put into that as it just sits there?
Well, I guess we call that the carrying costs of having the property just sitting there. There's still a cost to it. So the biggest one would be the mowing, assuming that you're going to mow the field, mow the grass that's around the outside. You have to maintain some security there. So there's security systems in the building. There is some minimal lighting there, some other minimal amount of utilities. All that together, though, I mean, it's a big complex, as Councilman Alshire said, and those carrying costs are probably in the $30,000 to $40,000 a year range. It's not insignificant, especially when you look at what the cost of demolition is, which isn't a whole lot more than that.
And let me ask you something just from the standpoint of that particular property itself, because we've seen issues crop up with the stadium in terms of flooding and things of that nature. So if we were to demolish the stadium and then use that property for, as Kristen suggested, an indoor turf facility, are there issues that would have to be overcome with that property so that those things didn't happen there? Or are those drainage issues that are inherent only with the stadium that currently sits on that property? Do we know that at all?
The issue is how the stadium is situated on the property, rather low. So when the two runs that come together, Town Run and Marsh Run, come together and there's a hard enough rain that it overflows, the water goes into the stadium. If you redeveloped that site, you could engineer it in a way that you could prevent building intrusion and have the water just flow through parking lots or something like that. That would be, no one would even think anything about it then.
And Kristen, I think when we consider the idea that you have, which quite frankly is not a new idea, you've stated this for years and years and years, and I think there are so many people that this resonates with because they've had kids who have gone through the travel and club sports world, and they've gone outside this area. They know exactly what you're talking about when you say, going down the road, even if it's seemingly as close as Frederick, it's still going down the road, and other money is spent elsewhere. With a facility like that, though, that you're talking about, is there a way that the city of Hagerstown would receive some sort of money back from a primary standpoint versus an ancillary perspective? Is there a way to make that happen so that we could potentially put some sort of dollar figure to this and say this is a ballpark figure where we would get X amount of money back from this?
Yeah, I think that the two folks that could speak to that best and have spoken to me over the years to that best are Dan Spedden, who clearly indicates that these types of activities bring in tourism dollars. And these types of youth sort of weekly recreational destination activities bring in lots of tourism dollars on a sort of regular rolling basis. The other individual that has spoke to that over and over through emails and direct communication is Mike Kelball with the softball league. I mean, he has the numbers crunched on so many different emails that we've corresponded back and forth of just how much of a tourism and thereby tax-related generation the various softball events like the fairgrounds and the other locations around the county bring in on such a regular basis. And so I think that I see that doing just the same. Speaking, though, of the fairgrounds specifically, because I think that part of the difficulty here is folks want to look at the stadium as sort of this singular space, this singular property. I've never looked at it that way. I've made it clear that when you look at what's going on around the stadium, it's always in flux with those other decline or reinvestment opportunities. And right now you have the property adjoining it on the other side of the run that's being demoed, that went through some recent calamity. You've had the MELP that's been torn down. You now have a private party that has bought and is looking to reinvest in the old processing plant. Mm-hmm. You have the expansion of Eastern Boulevard. You have the movement of the Board of Ed in those properties. And so for me, when we talk about the flooding issue, and I think I've alluded to this in the past, if you go down and you look at that run and you'll see the white outfalls, right, from the stadium that all go into the run, and the problem is that run fills up and then the white pipes can't drain anywhere. And so we talk about our MS4 obligations, which are our stormwater management. In fact, we talked about it, 2 years ago, we went out to the golf course, which is right next to this, right. Generally, is we have the ability to take a run that was basically compartmentalized into lined walls in a 6-week period back in 1930, right, 30 or 34, yeah. And renaturalize that and create an amenity connection between what would be an indoor turf facility, what would be, open space there at Hager Park, and get rid of the property in between, and what would be a creek connection to where MELP used to sit. So for me, I guess I continue to see it as sort of like, this is bigger than just one property and what do we do with it. This is sort of what do we want to see recreationally that brings folks in to the redevelopment of the East End, which was once sort of this largely manufacturer, industrial, feeling space, and make it feel new and vibrant again.
It's a shame that you haven't thought about this at all. but in all seriousness, one of the big things that was discussed during the meeting as it relates to this topic was the survey that mm-hmm. is going out, and there was a lot of alluding to that because this is part of the survey. This is one of the questions, or one that is sort of under the umbrella of recreation and things like that in the city that people would like to see. So this is a question that residents, citizens will get to weigh in on. But mm-hmm. in your mind, because of the time frame here, since we're in the middle of January, mm-hmm. we need to figure out what to do with this stadium. Doesn't it? And I don't want to lead the witness, so to speak, mm-hmm. with the question. But doesn't it sort of at this point, isn't it incumbent to some degree to make some sort of decision now and then maybe factor in some of that information that comes back from the survey eventually?
Yeah, I think it was reassuring that a good majority of the mayor and council this evening appeared in favor of at least moving forward with saying, okay, what would it cost to put up something like this? How would it look? Are there entities out there that would be interested in partnering? Mm-hmm. Because I think, as I said in the meeting, our last go around at this, we got 2 proposals that were well beyond what I envisioned, that were well beyond sort of that functional space that you can find, whether it be the Gaithersburg facility. I know that down in Wacomico County, they have one right next door in Frederick. You have this sort of very, very simple functional space that works successfully in Westminster. There are 3 fields there that hundreds of our kids go to every week to play at. And so for me, I think it's a matter of being able to move forward at least at this point and say, okay, what's it going to look like? What do we think the estimate would be? Are there people out there that will want to do it? Now that the sort of son's question is answered, are there really folks within this community or outside individuals or entities that want to partner in this process? And what's best for the long-term use of the community and the best long-term economic and fiscal stability of this type of facility? Because I think what I've said in other conversations, and I think I've had these with Rodney, is, we have dozens of gyms in this community. We have dozens of outdoor athletic fields, baseball fields and soccer fields. And the reality is we have no turf facilities.
Right.
And I appreciate the interest of all of those sports entities that say we need these and these types of facilities that we already have dozens of here. But I find and feel that it's more, it appears to be more of, do you want to pay to use the stuff that we already have, because there is a cost associated. And that gets me back to our baseball field, which is, yeah, folks are probably going to want to use it, but there's a cost associated with that I don't know that we should incur, especially when there's this better opportunity out there. And so I think if we head down this road, I think we really need to be cognizant of what's going to be the biggest bang for the buck.
Yeah.
And for me, visiting those other facilities, a turf-oriented facility that allows those turf-related activities is exactly what we don't have now, that we have so much of the other stuff of, that should be the priority.
And am I reading you right that you're perhaps a little frustrated by all of this? Because it shouldn't be perhaps that difficult, because this has been discussed for so long, and it has worked, as you said. There are models to look at and point to all around us, but just not here.
Yeah, I think for me, I don't know that it's frustration as much as it is surprise.
Okay.
Because, as much as we talk about being in this juxtaposition of sitting right along the intersection of I-81 and I-70,
Yeah.
and the economic benefit that has to the proximity of so many folks that come here, and then I look west at Cumberland and I look south, to Martinsburg and beyond, and north to Chambersburg area, I think, man, this city, this location is so ripe to sort of draw that interest from the region that would want to play at a facility like this, where they wouldn't be traveling up the Spooky Nook and down, to Westminster.
Right.
and points well away from here. I just think we're way too well positioned for something like this not to have come along already. And I think the land cost, frankly, along the interstate corridors, it makes this type of thing less tenuous, whereas this time we have the opportunity where we have the land that's already developed in a space to accommodate it.
Well, I think it certainly bears out your point when you see this interest that, Scott Nicewarner said is coming from some of these professional baseball teams, perhaps, because we just saw, a team, and, in no uncertain terms, sort of fail here in Hagerstown, yet you have this interest, and a lot of it has to do with location of where we are. So seemingly something like this, which has worked so well, and so many Hagerstown residents are familiar, again, with going down the road, that it would make so much sense here.
And for me, and Rodney and I had this conversation before, I have 5 children who don't play sports, but I grew up going to Alderson Broaddus College to play and traveling, down to Baltimore to play, and all these really cool venues that were cool back in that day. And so I don't do that now, but I see the need out there, and like it or not, being brutally honest with our citizens in this community, we as a community are much less inclined as a community to want to spend $7 or $12 on a minor league baseball game than we are to spend $200 or $300 on the best bat that our kids are going to use for their practice and games, right? I mean, it's just, and so I just kind of look at it that way and say, right there tells me where the interest level lies. Dick's Sporting Goods isn't selling all of this athletic equipment to kids, who are going to those amateur and professional events. They're doing that to the kids that want to engage in the play. And for me, this is the opportunity to provide that.
Right, and the
Something
thing,
local.
right, and the thing about it is, even though it might be perception, that is what is driving the money to be spent. Because instead of perhaps wanting to go out and see a future Major League Baseball star in a minor league park, instead, parents think, I might have the next superstar here in my own house, so I'm going to spend hundreds of dollars on this person. And we all do that because they're our own kids, and I get that part of it. Rodney, as far as the meeting itself tonight and talking about this topic there, are you clear on the direction? Now, I know it was a little murky to some degree because you were hearing things from all parties and, you know, the survey aspect of it. Certainly, Kristen making his point and, you know, crystal clear, but we're going to the RFP process from here. Sort of lay that out as we close this out.
Yeah, I think, well, in the short term, I think we will entertain some uses at the stadium.
And just real quick, I'm glad you mentioned that because we talk about not costing the city money or making it as negligible as possible. So will there be perhaps maybe parameters such as games only during the day so we don't have to turn the lights on at night, things of that nature? I mean, have you thought that far ahead at all? I mean, this is kind of fresh.
We don't have all those details worked out, but those, the direction I felt like I got tonight is, one, if they have things like that, it should be cost neutral or even make some money to help cover some of these carrying costs. The other thing is that we have to make it clear that this is a short-term, possibly a one-year calendar thing. But beyond that, then, we want to put together an RFP for a turf facility specifically, is what I heard them say.
Yeah.
That we'll be working on here over the next, weeks and months to get out on the street for that location.
Yeah, I think that makes perfect sense. Kristen, thanks for your time.
Thank you.
Rodney, you too.
Sure.
And thanks to all of you for watching. We'll see you back after the next work session right here on Council Wrap. For tonight, so long.